Hey, this is Oystein from Borknagar. You are watching Richard's Metal Fan.
Hey, what's up, guys? Episode 222 of Richard Metal Fan Interviews calling from Zoom, and I have a returning guest, round three, with Oystein from the almighty Borknagar. Thanks for coming back on, man. Great to be able to talk with you again.
Hey ho, pleasure, man. Pleasure, man.
Anytime. It feels like yesterday we were chatting at the Devastation of the Nation tour, and hard to believe that was like getting close to almost 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy how time flies in these days.
Dude, yeah,
Yes.
I agree. It's like it feels like yesterday. I was like, saw you all twice that tour. I saw you in Birmingham and then the next day in Atlanta. And here we are again for round three.
Yeah, awesome. Great.
Hell yeah. Yeah, so we got the new Borknagar album coming out called Fall, which comes out is out in February through Hemisphere Media Records. Do you want to talk to me about the whole writing and recording process, how that whole thing came to be, and that good stuff?
Yeah. We pretty much done the same procedures as last year. I was supposed to say, we kind of pretty much did the blueprint of what we did with True North in terms of recording and the process of making the album. We are always writing music, so it's not like, at certain time of year we write music and then we record. I always, sit around in my studio playing with all sorts of music, but also making music from time to time. And so I think that when we did the last European tour in Europe with Moonspell and Insomnium and Wolfheart, we kind of decided that okay, after this tour, we're gonna sit down and start working on a new album. To plan the new album and stuff like that. And I had a lot of material, and the other guys, Lars and Simon has had some songs as well, and we just gathered everything basically on the table and yeah, started to work with stuff. And I have a high-end studio here, and so I spent a lot of time, producing in the sense that trying out different ideas and trying out different mixing, kind of experimenting a little bit with sound and how to get the perfect atmosphere in a sense. And then we recorded the drums in Oslo in a studio there because I don't have a drum room in my studio. I'm basically doing mixing and mastering and stuff, actually for the most part mastering. So drums is not my thing, but we recorded drums in Oslo, and then we recorded pretty much everything else here in this studio. Um, Except for a few guitar takes and maybe some synth. Lars did a synth in his studio in Oslo, of course, because it's an easy thing to record synth. But otherwise, we pretty much did all recordings here in most of the recordings here in my studio, and I did some pretty. I spent a lot of time this time around, even more so than with True North. I spent, in studio here just listening to stuff and mixing and testing out different ideas and testing out different ways of, arranging stuff. And so I produced it quite hard, I would say, this time around. But that's something I find very satisfying as a musician, because to me, there's always been a frustrating element of being a musician, that you always depends on the studio, you depend on the engineer, you depend on a lot of other people to make your vision come true in a sense. So that's why I've kind of spent the last 10 year investing a lot, both money and time, to build my own studio in order to be able to not only be the guitarist of the band, but also be the producer of the band in a sense. That being said, it's important to say that Jens Borgren did a mix in his studio, Fascination Street Studio in Sweden, and he did a fabulous job, magic. His mixing skills are pure magic, I would say. But we had a kind of a quite decent mixes that we sent him, so that he had an idea or a notion of what we wanted to do with this one. So yeah, that was pretty much a process, I guess. A lot of
Awesome.
work, a lot of work.
Awesome. So did you wanted to also try to like continue in the same vein as True North, or do you wanted to try to do something new that Borknagar hasn't done previously?
Yeah, we always do that. We always challenge ourselves. I think that's in our body, that's in our musical soul, so to speak, to always try to push ourselves a little bit, and to not always take the safe, what can I say, the safe alternative. When we are a kind of a musical crossroad, we tend to not always take the safe road home. We sometimes we want to take the more challenging, risky way home, in a sense. And we that's something we all, for me, that is kind of the driving force being a musician. That is to be able to take a step further, to progress, to climb another mountain or something, something like that. So it's very in our blood, so to speak, to always push and, yeah, sort of broaden our musical horizon. So yeah, we wanted to, to continue, in a sense, uh, with the vibe of True North in a way, but we wanted to elaborate it even more and even, add even more texture to it, in a sense.
Yeah.
So I think, in my opinion, I think the new album Fall, True North I'm really happy with that album, and it's like almost perfect in my head. But Fall is, yeah, maybe even more. I mean, it's even more diverse, in a sense, maybe. Each and every song of Fall has a little bit of a different flavor, maybe a little bit more than True North, to some extent, I would say. So it's we are continue the same path in a way, but we also bring in a lot of new elements, I would argue.
Yeah, because it's kind of like a damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you have like a formula that you stick with, people say that you pretty much sound the same. And then, but if you try to experiment, people say you're inconsistent. But at the end of the day, you gotta like follow what your guts tell you to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is very important for me. I mean, I've always been very focused on this. I have this idea that music should be honest, in a sense, in the way that, for me, music, the real good music in this world, because I'm also a music lover. I love listening to music, Pink Floyd, everything basically. I love listening to music myself. I think that for me, and this is my perspective, of course, but for me, the really good music is the music that is kind of reflecting the human diversity, in a sense, that, life is not always, there is no, some days is rainy, other days is sunshine, some days you're filled up with sorrow, the next day you are filled up with, happiness, for example. Life is a big contrast in itself by the core, and I think that in order to be able to make music that really engage people, I think you need to bring in all these human facets in the music. At least that's my approach to it. So I want it to be sometimes dark, sometimes spiky and raw, but other times I want it to be beautiful and soft, because that is something that to me makes music more interesting and makes music more as an experience rather than just being an entertainment, if that makes any sense. When I started out, the early days when I was younger, I never had the idea about becoming an entertainer of sorts. Being an entertainer per definition is so far from being me that it's crazy. But I've approached this more like this is a musical journey. This is a musical journey I want to invite people onto, in a sense, rather than I'm the entertainer being on a stage entertaining people. I want to more kind of project and kind of a musical journey or expedition, or call it whatever you want, that I want to invite people, fans, everybody onto.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's fair to say because me as a fan of Borknagar, I feel like you all have evolved. Like every album sounds different, like going from like the first album to Archaic Course to Empiricism to even the new album Fall. So it's always fair to say that it's just like no album just fall continues after another. It's sort of like a natural evolution.
Yeah, and I think natural is a keyword also, because I think, that's our way of making music. That's my way of approaching music. I mean, the day I would, find myself repeating myself and just walking in circles, I would quit. Why should, I don't see any, musical pleasure in just doing what I've always done in a sense. In order for me to have this spirit of going on and making another album and another album and doing this for such a long time, you need to have this very kind of almost childish excitement, passion for doing music. And I think for me to be able to preserve this is to always take a step further. I mean, that's life. I mean, people walk forward, don't backwards usually. It's something that with this is a very natural thing for us humans to evolve and to progress and to take a step further. That's the most human thing on this planet. I'm not the same guy today as when I was back in the mid-90s, for example. I was twice as young, and my life has changed. The world have changed and everything has changed. So why should I do the same thing as I did when I was 22?
Yeah, totally, because like you're not the same person as you once were. Like I'm not the same as I was when I first got into metal when I was like 12, and I'm almost 30. So it's funny how you change a lot, but you're still the same person, but you change a lot, like personality wise, and mature a lot.
Yeah, I think so. And also, at least from in my case, or probably that's the same for everybody. But it's something when you're aging. In my age, I'm 48 now, and when you're kind of turning 40, at least from my experience, like kind of you take things a little bit more easy. There is a couple of things that when you're younger, kind of stress a lot with things that isn't really that important. In the end of the day, so you get a little bit more secure, self-secure in a sense. You get a little bit more give a fuck about what things and stuff like that. But you also, I would say, you get also a brighter horizon on things because you have lived longer. You have more experience about life. You have been down. You have been up. You have been through all these changes of or these shifts of life. So I think it's the most natural thing, to bring also this into the music in to some extent, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, and kind of going back into the new album Fall, because every time when Borknagar releases a new album, I always get really excited. I also want to talk about the title Fall, which I know is a typical interview question, like, oh, where'd that title come out? I'm just curious about how the title came to be, and even like the artwork, it definitely fits like the whole vibe of the album.
Yeah, I mean it's a quite cool story about that, both the cover and the album title, to be honest. And the thing is that we had a little slightly different plan. We had, let me start. The thing is that always when we do a new album, the final piece of the puzzle is the album title. I mean, even after we do the band photos and we have recorded or shot the videos, we land on the album title. That's the last piece of the puzzle for us. So also on this time around, we was like a little bit, yeah, as usual, we was having a couple of album title, like working titles, so to speak. Just, maybe this, maybe that, maybe something like this. And at some point when we approached the deadline, like roughly a month before the deadline of the album, I talked with the one guy at Century Media Records, and they had been at some kind of event in Berlin, some music event where people in the business meet up and stuff like that. And they talked a little bit with Elleron Cantor, and he was a big fan of the band, and he told one of the guys at Century Media that, yeah, I would really love to at one point do a cover for these guys because I love the band and blah blah, which is very cool, of course. And they called me back and, hey, Elleron is really keen on doing the new cover and stuff. I was like, okay, but we might have a little bit too short of time because it's only 1 month till deadline, and he usually spends like 2 months or something doing a proper cover for a band.
Right.
But we decided. I called him. And I talked with him for 3-4 hours. I guess we talked, of course, a little bit about music, but most of all, we talked about just because know each other a little bit. He being a daddy, I'm a daddy. Talking about life in general, basically, just to learn to know each other somehow. The only thing I told him basically was that I want a cover. The two things that's important for me with the cover for the new album. That is that it somehow should show the uncompromising wilderness of nature, in a sense. The brutality, the fierce forces of nature. I wanted the cover to show that. And the second thing was basically I wanted to have an element of human presence. Not right now. I don't want a human being on the cover. I don't want a face or a body on the cover, but I want something that reminds of a human presence at some point in time. That was basically all. And then I gave him, just listen to the music. At that point, we just had demos. We hadn't finished the mix of the album yet. So he got my demos and he got the lyrics, and we didn't pretty much talk for a month. And when I got the cover, I was like, wow, this is cool. He pinpointed, the atmosphere of the lyrics and the music and everything in the most perfect, brilliant way, I would say. And when I saw the cover, my first reaction to it was like, okay, the album is going to be called Fall, quite simply. And it came, so actually the whole thing with the cover and the title was a dynamic process together with the band and Elron Cantor, actually. So we ended up with the fall title of the album because of the cover this time around, and I think that's quite cool, actually.
Yeah, and then like kind of like going back, because I know you mentioned like the direction of the album, and obviously I feel like the band has moved into a new direction very recently. Like I remember even a buddy of mine described you all as like the Norwegian Mastodon Don in a way. So kind of like since the last album, you pretty much had like the same lineup, and seeing as it's now the second album with the same lineup, how different as has the sort of like the dynamics been from True North to Fall?
It's just improved, just becoming way better because we know each other much better. I mean, the last couple of years since True North, we have never toured as much as we did after True North. Oh, yeah, we had the pandemics first and then after the pandemic, of course. But we toured USA together. We toured, a lot of festivals in Europe, and we played in Istanbul and Turkey, and we played and also did this European tour with Moonspell and Insomnium. So when we did True North, the guys in the band, Björn, a drummer, and Oystein, they was pretty new guys in the band. So that was more like they came into, we already wrote all the songs, everything was pretty much settled, and we just, come on, let's record some drums and do some guitars and let's move on, kind of thing. But this time around, they was way more involved, I would say, in the whole process of making the album. So we, for instance, I gave all my songs to Jostein, my fellow guitarist, way before the rest of the guys in the band, because I wanted Jostein to be part of the process of establishing the guitar work on the album, not being a guy that's come afterwards when everything is done and said and then add something. I wanted it into the creative process in a way. So it worked really, really good, really, really satisfying as a musician for me. And it was a beautiful process, I would say, in many, many ways. And I think we are much more, as a band, we are much more integrated now and much more on the same page. And we share the same mentality towards music and stuff like that. So it's very good, I would say.
Yeah, and I could definitely tell from like the music, there was a lot of like passion in there, and I really appreciate it, especially given how long I've been listening to you guys. So it's nice to hear that there is sort of like no limits to like all in the music that you guys create.
Yeah, and I'm very happy you say so, because that was also one of the notions I got with this album. That I remember I told that to one journalist a long time ago that, you know, yeah, as an example, True North, to me, it was a great album, but it was a cold album in many ways. It was quite rough album in many ways, but there was also something uplifting about it, something energizing about that album, I would say. And that was something I wanted to bring on to this new album as well, Fall. I wanted it to be, yeah, dark, it's brutal. Some of the thematics is really harsh and at times pitch black in a sense. But there is still some gleam of hope. There is still some energy in it. There is something uplifting about it. And I think, for me, that is kind of the core of the metal in a way. Metal should add something. I mean, should give you something. Metal is at least to me, metal music, it's something that should be in some way energizing and making you stronger, or give you some kind of, I don't know, experience that adds something to
Yeah.
your life,
Or just make you
positive.
feel like you belong.
For example. So I think we succeed, and I think that also we love what we're doing. We love the music we're playing, and I really hope that, and that was my main point here, that I really hope um, that people hear that we enjoy doing what we do. I hope that shines through the album. When people listen to the album, I hope people get the impression that these guys are doing this with their hearts, not just for the money, if you get my point.
Yeah,
So yeah, we really do. I mean, this is our passion. This is our, to me, this is the music is a life commitment. It's my lifestyle. It's my way of living. It's something I'm going to do till the end of the days, at least for my in my case. So it's for me, this is more than just a business or being in a band or being, whatever. It's for me, it's a lifestyle. It's a passion. It's a lifelong dedication.
definitely. And kind of going back into the new album, of course, I love like the first two singles being Summits and of course Nordic Anthem, which came out today. They I feel like every song is like a different because I feel like those two songs are like night and day. So it's almost fair to say like you and Simon and Lars and everybody sort of like capture like a different emotion to the songwriting. And even like some of the older stuff, like I hear hints of like even black metal, but even like the progressive kind of stuff, even folk metal. So I guess it's fair to safe to share like everybody sort of like brings in like their own influence into Borknagar.
Yeah. And I think that's has always been my kind of principle, in a sense that, if I have a guitarist in the band, I want to exploit the guy, not in a bad way, but in a good way. I mean, I want to make him shine. I want to make him do the best he can. And if that means, just as an example, if that means sending Simon to the North Pole with a microphone to do the vocals, well, let's do it. It's or maybe a stupid example though, but my point is that I try the best I can as the kind of band leader to make everybody in the band shine, to make them kind of use the best of their abilities in a sense. To me, that's very important because, you know, yeah, Björn is such a brilliant drummer, for example, and it would be stupid for me to ask him to just do a simple beat or just play blast on everything, or he need to be, get the room and space to be himself and do the best he can as a drummer.
Yeah, push boundaries.
And push boundaries. Yeah, that's kind of in our blood. So yeah, it's very important for me.
Awesome. And kind of want to talk about some anniversaries because next year will mark 30 years of the formation of Borknagar. Got to think about it, Oystein. Almost 30 years of Borknagar. Did you think that you'd be around for 30 years? And is there still anything else you would like to achieve with Borknagar?
It's almost like surreal when kind of starting to count years and time, and time flies. Well, yeah, I'm kind of a little bit baffled about the whole thing, to be honest. It's crazy in many ways. When I started out the band back in the days in the early 90s, I had no, maybe I was a weird guy, but I was never really into this dream about being a rock star or being on a stage or being famous or anything like that. I was always very engaged into the music and making music, but that was basically all. So being here 30 years later, it's like, what happened in so many ways. But again, it's kind of, I have a bit both ways on it, because on the other hand, I've worked so much through the years. I've sacrificed so many, there were so many vacations I have not traveled on with my wife and my family because I can't, because bad daddy in a store, and all these things you have to endure. But has been a long musical journey, a lot of ups and downs, but still, it kind of amazes me how powerful music is, to be honest. I mean, I remember back in the early days, I had this notion that the really great music in this world is going to last forever. It's gonna, the classic songs of Pink Floyd or the classic songs of Beethoven, for that sake, they will linger on forever. That will be musical or cultural treasures forever. And that power, that the potential of power music have, is something that have amazed me, since I started out. And now when I see I'm kind of done all this, I've been touring around, I've been meeting fans, playing festivals, done all that stuff. It's crazy to see how powerful music really is and how life-changing music is. And usually for the better, you know. I mean, music is to me a very positive thing.
Yeah. And also this year does mark 20 years of the Epic album. What I wanted to ask is what was sort of like the thought process going into making that album? And did you also want to the sort of like set like sort of like the route that Borknagar would go on like future albums such as like to True North to even Fall?
The Epic album, I have to be honest about it, and to me that is probably my least favorite album we have done ever.
Really?
Yeah, I don't, I don't know why, but honestly, I haven't listened to it for 20 years. So I don't know anymore. But I when I think about it, it's like I just remember that that point when we did that album, there was a lot of troubles. There was a lot of challenges in our lives. I was just become a daddy, and there was a lot of issues and stuff, people quitting, and we didn't have a bass player, I remember, so the drummer had to do the bass and stuff. And it was, I was at that time, actually I was not doing much music. I was actually a CEO at the at the institution for mentally ill people at that time. I wasn't that focused on music in that period of my life, I remember. But we did the album because we had contractual obligation, and I was doing music, so we did it. But it didn't. We did a. I don't know. It didn't. It to me it feels a little bit like a demo, if I can say so. It's yeah, it is what it is. But that was not the best time of the band, I would say. I remember there was a lot of difficult things and issues and whatnot, and it was complicated, I remember. But it's done, it's there, and we have to live with it. But it's part of our legacy. But I remember one thing I remember about the album, that we was a little bit, we wanted to just do everything of everything on that album, in a sense. We wanted to be a huge album in the sense that kind of very philosophic lyrics, kind of very kind of complicated music at times, and a lot of arrangement and stuff. And so yeah, it was what it was. And then after Epic, I got this notion, okay, now we have to drag everything down to earth. And then we did the acoustic original album to
Yeah.
pull everything back down to the ground. And yeah. So this was kind of a weird story, but
Right.
it's part of our history, I guess.
Awesome. And I got a couple more questions for you. You have
Yep.
that's cool. It's kind of like talking about your live show because was when I saw you all on the Rotting Christ tour twice. I feel like seeing you all live is different than just listening to you all. So how different of a mind frame is it to like playing live versus like recording? Is there any differences or similarities between the two?
Absolutely. I mean, to me, I've always been thinking in my back of my head that, doing an album is one thing and doing live is another thing. I mean, sometimes if this was only a company, I would maybe have two divisions, one division doing albums and one division, doing live shows, maybe. Yeah, it's different. It's different. And especially in our case, because, we can't, at least at this point, we can't reproduce everything on the albums because sometimes some songs is too arranged, there is too much layers, there is too much guitars going on. We can't, do that live because we are only two guitarists and we have only two vocalists, and so on and so forth. So we have to simplify it a little bit, I guess, live. But that's also kind of, in a way, that's also a good thing to do, because then we have to force ourselves to boil down the songs to a live format, in a sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting, because it's a different, for me at least, it's a completely different approach doing live than sitting in my studio doing, writing or mixing or whatever I do.
Yeah.
It's different, but of course it's music. It's always, it's music still, but doing a live show is, in my head, it's something that is a completely different setting. You are traveling, you are away from home, you are you're on stage, you're playing live in the sense that you can't, stop and record one more time because you did something wrong, for example, and stuff. So it's we have the music is in common, but the settings are, in my mind, very different. But I
Yeah.
love both.
Yeah, and I noticed that you also play for like a different type of crowds because I know you mentioned you did that European tour with Moonspell and Insomnium, which are kind of like melodic death metal and goth metal, and then you did that tour with Rotting Christ, which is more kind of like the extreme reaction. Do you ever like notice like a different like reaction to the crowd depending on the different tours that you're on?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, when people ask me, what's your favorite country? It's like, no, I can't say that because it depends, very much on the cities, to be honest. It depends, if is it a Friday or is it a Saturday or is it a Monday? So it's quite different. But what we notice sometimes, or quite often actually, is that it seems like people, we are not the typical band that people start mosh pitting and stage diving and stuff like that. But when we see the audience, when we see the eyes of the audience, we see that they are really kind of engaged in the music. They are a part of the journey and stuff like that. So we see the pleasure, but I among the fans. But I think we see that a little bit different than maybe a typical death metal band would, see. It's a different dialogue in a sense. But it depends very much on what day of the week, what city is what band we are playing together with, for instance. Is it a festival or is it just a tour? So it depends more on those things, to be quite honest. So it's very difficult to, in my head at least, to find any kind of right answer to it, to be honest, because it depends so much on from day to day, and yeah, all those things.
Yeah, I agree, Oystein. And then the final question I wanted to ask you is talking about like your gear because I feel like you have like a sick guitar sound. Now I'm always curious like what kind of guitars that you use, like strings, pedals, amps, and all that good stuff.
All right, yeah, I have my main guitar. That one is it's an ESP Eclipse, which I always use. I shouldn't use it live because it's a very expensive guitar though, but I always use that one because I feel comfortable with it. But ESP guys is always, you have to use it more cheaper live because live you kind of destroy the guitars and stuff like that. But I always use my ESP main guitar live, and then of course I have a backup guitar which is like this the more cheaper version of ESP guitars. And then I use when it depends on when if you ask live or studio, because it's different though. But live I use that guitar, and then I use my Bias amp, um, which I can kind of tune my sound in my studio and then transfer it via the USB cable to my amp, and then I can just rig it in whatever venue, and you get the same sound every night. And that's all really.
Awesome. So
But of course, in a studio setting, when mixing an album and recording guitars, I use different amps. I use, angle amp. I have a real one in my recording room, in the next room here. And I use, actually, to be quite honest with you, on the new album, we use quite some plugins, really great sounding plugins, digital plugins.
nice.
And it's all about the EQ, and how you tweak the sound and stuff like that. So, and not to forget, it has also something to do with how you play your guitar. Even more than you might think, actually. I'm doing a lot of production in my studio, recording, tweaking sound on guitars and stuff, and a lot of I think more than people sometimes believe, the sound of the guitar is the way the guitarist is playing the guitar.
Well said, Oystein. So thank you, man, for taking this time to do this interview. We were great chatting with you again. Again, is just anything else with the release of Fall you would like to plug in terms of like tours and stuff? And when can we expect Borknagar to come back to the States for a tour? We'd love to have you again.
Yeah, would love to as well. Yeah, we are just now in the middle of releasing the album. We have some videos coming, and we are doing some festivals this year in Europe. We are planning a European tour in late summer this year with a pretty famous band. I can't say more about it because it's not official yet and stuff like that, but there will be some live shows definitely. And we would love to come back to the US. But at this point, I don't exactly know when and stuff, but maybe late this year or early next year or something. Let's hope. Let's see.
Awesome. So thank you, Oystein. Is just any final words you want to say to the viewers that are watching this to close us out?
Do me a favor and check out the new album. That's all I have to say. Hope you like it.
Awesome. So everybody, Oystein for Borknagar, check out the new album Fall coming out February 23rd through Century Media Records. See you next time.